Today's episode of True Crime with Kendall Rae is brought to you by PDS Debt, and thanks to their support and support from viewers like you as well, today I'm able to make a donation to International Bluegrass Music Association. Getting yourself into credit card debt can unfortunately be quite easy to do, but getting out, that's a completely different story. And that's because the system is set up so that you don't. And if you're struggling with credit cards, personal loans, medical bills, or collections, you need to check out PDS Debt. PDS provides you with a service to match you with debt solutions tailored to your specific financial situation. If you're making payments every month on your debt and your balances just aren't going down, PDS Debt has solutions for you. And everyone with $10,000 or more in eligible debt qualifies, and there is no minimum credit score required. Bad and fair credit are accepted. You can save money while paying off your debt in a fraction of the time. Back when my husband and I were in college, he ended up in quite a bit of credit card debt, due to the expenses of being on your own at a young age. It can get expensive quickly, and it's easy to put all of that on a credit card. And we used a service that is very similar to PDS Debt. PDS Debt wasn't an option for us at the time, but I so wish it was because it's excellent. So stop waiting and start saving. Get a free debt analysis right now at pdsdebt.com/KR. It only takes 30 seconds. That's pdsdebt.com/KR. Once again, pdsdebt.com/KR. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to True Crime with Kendall Rae. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am so happy to have you, and if you're new, welcome. Be sure to click subscribe so that you never miss an upload from me. And on that note, I wanted to thank everyone. A couple weeks ago, I can't remember which episode it was, but I asked you to check your subscription status and make sure you're actually subscribed if you thought you were, because YouTube, for some reason, unsubscribes people from channels. I know that this has been happening for years. I don't know why YouTube does anything they do, but I couldn't believe the amount of you who commented saying that you thought you were subscribed and you were unsubscribed by YouTube. Love it. But let's get into this case, you guys. We have quite a wild one this week. A really very sad story that is very frustrating when you hear the details of how this happened. And mind-blowing to think that the two responsible for Harold Allen's death almost got away with it. Quite possibly could have. And it really got me thinking about how many people actually do get away with murder. I mean, we all know it happens. We see how often people almost get away with it and tells us that people probably do get away with it. But just how often? Just how often is someone's death considered to be an accident? And so no one is ever held responsible. No one even knows that they were murdered. This case I found in my request form, which is always linked below if you didn't know. But I started looking into the details of it and just looking at the case coverage in general. And I realized that there's barely been any coverage on this case. A little bit, but very, very minimal. And so I wanted to bring awareness to Harold's story today. Unfortunately, with there being such little coverage on it, there isn't that much information about Harold Allen himself, which is a bummer because I really like to learn as much as I can about the people that I cover. And I think it's really important that we remember people for who they were before what happened to them. Unfortunately, there isn't, like I said, that much on Harold, but I still wanted to cover it today. As you'll hear me say in this episode, Harold seemed, from what I do know, to have been a very good man. Obviously, I don't know everything about him, but from what has been reported, he seemed like a really solid, mellow dude, down to earth, just living a pretty normal life with his stepchild and his wife, who he loved dearly, and really almost out of nowhere, his life just ended. And besides the fact that his very sudden death was a major tragedy and a shock to friends and family, no one at the time realized that there was anything deeper to it. But there was. But before I get too ahead of myself, let's start by talking about who Harold Allen was, as far as we know. I really loved this little fact, but Harold was also known as Peanut by a lot of his loved ones, and he was born on September 29th, 1970 in Scottsburg, Indiana to his parents, Alan Sr. and Carolyn. And he also had two brothers, James and Matthew. And from what's been reported about him, Harold seemed to be a really good and hardworking man. He loved motorcycles, bluegrass music, his friends, and his family, and worked very hard at his job at Aisin USA, which is an automotive components and systems manufacturing company. And in 2022, he was 52 years old and living in Freetown, Indiana, with his wife, Marsha, and her adult daughter from a previous relationship, Ashley Jones. Now, I can't say for certain when exactly the two of them met and got married, but I do know that above all else, this man really cherished his wife. And if you're watching this episode, then you're already seeing it in the pictures, but the number of photos of them smiling, of them traveling around, having experiences together, I mean, it looks like he couldn't have been happier, which of course, we never really know what's going on behind the scenes, and Instagram, pictures, Facebook, all of that can be very deceiving. There seems to be a lot of photos of them in different cities and all these cool new places, and again, you can't judge a book by its cover, but they do look like a happy, loving couple, at least on film, which is what makes what happened to him even more devastating. It was December 20th, 2022, and that afternoon, a 911 call was placed to report that Harold was found unconscious. And by the time that paramedics arrived at their home, it unfortunately was just too late. At just 52 years old, Harold passed away. And like I said at the beginning of this episode, his sudden death was a major devastation and shock to his family. Or at least I should say to most of his family. There were two people who were not surprised or devastated about his death, and that was his wife, Marsha, and her daughter, Ashley. Because of their selfish, evil, inhumane actions, Harold's friends and family were robbed of what could have been several more decades, really, of life with him. And the worst part about it all is they almost got away with it. Almost, but really could have. However, they didn't, thankfully, and that is because, quite frankly, they are idiots. And I am glad that they were as dumb as they were. So let me explain what the two of them did and how they ended up getting caught. So the beginning of the end started on September 19th, 2023, almost 9 months to the day to when Harold passed away back in December of 2022. And on that day, after now living alone in the house that she once shared with her husband, Marsha called the cops to report that her home had been burglarized. And the police were quick to identify the two that they believed were responsible, and their names are Stephen Andrew White and Nathaniel Kane Napier. And for the purposes of this episode, we're going to be focusing more on Stephen White, and that's because he was the one to provide the police with some very interesting information. According to Stephen, he and Nathan were the ones to break into Marsha's home. However, according to him, it wasn't their idea. According to court documents, Stephen said that Ashley, as in Marsha's daughter, was the one who orchestrated the entire thing. And apparently Marsha had even said that she suspected it was her daughter because she was the only other person that knew the code to their gun safe, which had been opened during the burglary. But that's not all that he told them. According to an affidavit, Stephen told a lieutenant that Ashley and her mother straight up murdered Harold by poisoning him. And keep in mind, this is 9 months after he died. This is the first time that any suspicion is being drawn to his murder at all. And luckily, this was an accusation that authorities took seriously. So the very next day on September 20th, detectives spoke to Marsha, but she, of course, adamantly denied having anything to do with her husband's death. And I assume that she was trying to be very forthcoming and just, I'm so innocent, you can look me up and down and through everything I have, and you're not going to find anything. And she very confidently handed over her phone, which I really get a kick out of that because homegirl clearly did not know that when you delete something from your phone, there is no deleting it. Police are going to find everything in your phone, what was on your phone at any point in time. Official documents say, quote, "In Marsha's cell phone, there were many text messages beginning in November 2022 between Marsha and Ashley in which the two discussed poisoning Harold. Ashley was living with Marsha in Freetown, Indiana until sometime after Harold died on December 20th, 2022. And of course, to make all of this make sense, we are now going to go back in time to where this all started unfolding before Harold was killed. And before that, I have two quick disclaimers. Since there is such little and, for the most part, fairly poor coverage on this case, I noticed that there were a few varying accounts of what type of poison was used and when it was used. Not for all of them, because yes, there were multiple different types of poison, but for some of them, it got quite confusing trying to figure this out. Some sources say one thing, some sources say something different. It's just one of those cases where there's a lot of mixed reporting going on and it's hard to make sense of it all, especially because some of them don't even provide specifics, which is really, really annoying. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is I'm going to be referencing court documents and the affidavit quite a few times as we go through this case. However, neither of them have been fully published. So when I reference them, I am referencing articles that reference them. And I'm guessing that those sources put in FOIA requests to get the information and didn't publish them in full. So the actual documents are not available online. Definitely made things a little harder. And obviously I wish I did have these documents because they would definitely clarify a lot of questions I have, a lot of discrepancies in the reporting. And instead I sort of had to piece things together from a bunch of different sources and try to make sense of it as best as I could. And just to be safe, I'm going to tell you everything that I did find that I feel pretty confident about, but I will clarify when there is a detail where I'm less certain. But yeah, tangent over. Let's just get into it. So like I mentioned earlier, texts between Marsha and Ashley regarding the murder of Harold Allen began in November of 2022. And in these texts, the two of them are talking about foxglove seeds. And if you didn't know, foxglove is actually a really beautiful flower. It's a pinkish purple flower that's very beautiful to look at. But what I didn't know about it is it's highly toxic. Interestingly, around the same time that they were texting about these poisonous seeds, investigators discovered that Marsha was simultaneously Googling how much foxglove is fatal, what happens if you eat foxglove seeds, and how long does foxglove take to kill you. Ashley was even allegedly cautioning her mom that foxglove seeds are traceable, so basically that she needed to be careful. Now, here's where it starts to get a little complicated. We do know for a fact that on November 27th, 2022, Harold went to the ER because he said that the left side of his face was feeling numb, which I can imagine would be a very, very scary feeling. Obviously, something you want to be seen for right away. And not only that, he also just generally wasn't feeling good. He was having some major stomach problems. And we also know for a fact that he was rehospitalized again on the 30th for symptoms that included vomiting, diarrhea, a fever, and chills. So he was in pretty bad shape. And all of these things he was experiencing are symptoms of consuming foxglove. And sources even report that it was, in fact, the foxglove that caused these hospital visits. Here's a direct quote from Fox 59. The document said that Marsha Allen and Ashley Jones reportedly attempted to poison Harold Allen by putting the root of the foxglove into chili and a brownie given to Harold Allen. This resulted in 2 hospital visits in late November, where Harold Allen reported numbness on the left side of his face as well as gastrointestinal issues. Here's the thing though, and one of the points that makes this case so confusing is it has also been reported that it was a different type of poison that made him experience these symptoms and go to the hospital. It's been reported that earlier in September of 2022, Ashley ordered pong pong seeds from eBay. And that is definitely something I had never heard of. But similar to foxglove, pong pong seeds are also very, very toxic. Again, I had never heard of pong pong seeds or pong pong fruits, so I wanted to look it up. And from what I found, they are balls of the skeletonized fruit of Cerbera odolum, or suicide tree pong pong. Within each fruit is a kernel that is extremely toxic, and a single kernel can be fatal if eaten, and it poses a risk to both pets and people. And sources say that these pong pong seeds that apparently she could just order online arrived in mid-October, and Ashley and her mom waited until November to grind them up and put them in brownies to poison Harold with. So basically, according to those sources, the pong pong seeds are what caused the initial hospital visits in November. Here's a direct quote from the source Law and Crime. Jones, Ashley, and Martha Allen allegedly received the pong pong seeds in the mail in October of 2022, ground them up in a coffee grinder, and then put them in a batch of brownies on November 26, 2022. So clearly, we have two different sources here saying two different things, and that's unfortunately not where the confusion ends. Let's say it was the foxglove that caused those initial hospital visits that was put into those brownies. Well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense because a lot of other sources say that they didn't get the foxglove seeds until December. So if the brownie poisoning happened in November, then the math doesn't really math. But again, I don't know if it's just incorrect reporting. Also, why were there texts between Ashley and her mom on December 2nd talking about how to handle the plant, like how to not get poisoned while touching it? If they had already used it to poison him at that point instead of the pong pong, then why would they just now be talking about this, Which maybe they just didn't think about it before. I really don't know. And it's possible that there was more than one brownie incident, and maybe I'm just overthinking this. This was all just really annoying trying to figure out what exactly happened, but it's probably best to just look at the big picture here, which is that Ashley and Marsha were texting about poisoning Harold and Googling questions about certain poisons, and they allegedly put some type of poisonous seed into a brownie with the intent to kill him as early as November. And I say allegedly because at this point, no one has been convicted. But one thing that I can definitely confirm is that regardless of the type of poison that they put into the brownies, these two women were very pissed off that it didn't work. In November, right after it was apparent that Harold wasn't going to die, Marsha texted Ashley, "I am irritated and can't sleep peacefully. I need this to be over. I wish it would reach its climax and be done. LOL." LOL. This woman literally said LOL when talking about poisoning her husband. It's hard to put into words how evil that actually is, right? It's, my God. And then her having the nerve to say, "I am irritated and can't sleep peacefully." You know who's also not been sleeping so peacefully lately? Harold. He has been in the hospital in immense pain, has no idea what's wrong with him, and you are sitting here, you know exactly why, and you're just not sleeping peacefully, and you're irritated because it's not working fast enough. You want it to hit the climax and just be over with. People will never cease to amaze me with how truly evil they can be. And then Ashley responds to her mom and just says, "Agree," which is outrageous. And unfortunately, there is one more confusing element to the poison that I need to explain. Sources say that on December 1st, 2022, Ashley placed an EDSA order for foxglove and water hemlock, which is another highly toxic plant. The source said that the poison was delivered on December 8th, and over the course of the next few days, they allegedly put the poison in a variety of things to try and kill Harold. This included some chili, a margarita, and a soda. And here's what's a little confusing though, and it's the same old runaround, but basically some articles, some sources are saying that it was the water hemlock that was used to poison those things, and other sources are saying it was the foxglove. Ashley even later admitted that her mom put the foxglove in the brownies and chili. So if that's the case, what's the deal with this water hemlock? So yeah, very confusing here. But what really matters is the big picture, and that's that these two, Harold's wife and his stepdaughter, were making multiple attempts to poison him, actually followed through on those attempts with more than one type of poison, and none of it was working. So what did they do? They resorted to a different type of poison, and luckily this part is crystal clear. On December 13th, 2022, Ashley placed an order for ethylene glycol, which is the main ingredient in antifreeze, which we have definitely heard before in other cases, and 1 week later, on the 19th, the package was delivered. And we know this because Ashley texted her mom when the package arrived and said, "The mail is here," with a smiley face. Yeah. So Marsha then gets this text message with the smiley face, letting her know that the mail is here, and she reacts to it with a heart. These two just blow me away. And then she followed that up later on with a message that said Harold was all in for root beer floats. And that was truly the beginning of the end. On December 20th at 7:55 a.m., Marsha texted her daughter asking her to come over, mentioning that Harold was acting drunk and loopy. And hours later, at 2:59 p.m., 911 was called. And it's actually believed that Harold had passed away long before this call was ever placed, and that his death was the result of ethylene glycol poisoning. Like I said earlier, though, at the time, foul play was not suspected in his death. And that's because Harold did have diabetes, and so while his death was absolutely, without a doubt, tragic and really shocking, it didn't really raise any major red flags. And as I explained earlier, it wasn't until the burglary in September of 2023 that the police even caught wind of any of this. So let's talk about what happened once the police did figure this out and where the case stands as of today. Between September 19th and October 13th, so almost a month, investigators were uncovering all of those incriminating text messages and started to put the pieces together about what truly caused Harold's death. And because what they found was incredibly damning, of course, they were granted a search warrant for the home that Harold and Marsha shared, the home that Marsha was still living in. And that search warrant was executed on October 16th, during which they seized several electronic devices. But before they could even process any of that additional evidence, the police ended up getting a call from Marsha's family asking for them to perform a welfare check on her. And when they did, they found out that Marsha was no longer alive. And it has been reported that her death was the result of a suicide. However, no cause of death has been officially released. So we're not completely sure there. And I'm sure some of you, maybe a lot of you, are wondering if maybe Ashley could have had something to do with it. Well, turns out she could not have, because she had actually been arrested 2 weeks earlier on October 3rd on charges related to the burglary. And she was also charged again on October 18th, this time though for her role in her stepdad's murder. And at the time, her charges included 1 count of murder, 1 count of felony murder, 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, and 1 count of product tampering resulting in serious bodily injury. And I briefly mentioned this earlier, but Ashley did end up admitting to some things. After her arrest, she admitted to a small role in Harold's murder, but only that she was the one who ordered the ethylene glycol. She was adamant that it was her mom who did the actual poisoning, not her.
A woman is now facing a murder charge after a burglary led police to uncover a conspiracy to kill her stepfather. Ashley Jones is in the Jackson County Jail on a burglary charge, but she's also facing charges in the death of Harold Allen. Now, he died in December of last year. Last month, Allen's widow, Marsha Allen, reported a burglary at her house that police linked to her daughter. That's when investigators found text messages between Jones and her mother planning the death of Harold Allen. The police questioned Marsha Allen, but they did not arrest her at the time. Then on Monday, Allen was found dead in her house. The cause of the death is not known. Police say yesterday, Jones confessed to buying poison off the internet, but said her mother was the one who put it in Harold Allen's drink.
But what I'm about to tell you will probably make you think that she could have had a bigger role in this after all. During the course of their investigation, detectives got a hold of the text messages between Stephen White and Ashley. If you don't remember, Stephen White is the guy from the burglary who ratted them out. And what they found paints a much different picture than what Ashley was trying to paint. In July of 2023, Ashley was texting Stephen, and I cannot believe in today's day and age people are still dumb enough to do this, but apparently they are. And basically, she told him that she was the one behind it all and that her mom couldn't have pulled it off without her, like truly bragging that she was the mastermind. And let me just read you some of those texts because they are outrageous to say the least. She says, "Ha ha ha, yeah, she ain't gonna be able to do shit. She wouldn't have even succeeded with this last thing without me. I planned it all. She was gonna use insulin like 1983. So something else was hatched, and we both know that bitch wasn't the one planning, etc. She just fucking fucked it all up. Made it less lucrative. Wouldn't even make it to go get a will. She couldn't even get into a dead man's phone without me to get all of his retirements and savings he had hidden. Hell, she got $4,500 from his PayPal account because I showed her how to scam it as him before they find he's gone. She's fake AF. She didn't give me shit out of that. So yeah, she's here saying her mom is too dumb to have pulled any of this off without her, yet she's the one who's dumb enough to send all of this over text messages to Steven. So not only does this paint Ashley as, quite frankly, an idiot, but also supposedly playing a much bigger role in all of this. And it also points to their motive. From these messages alone, which is what we really have to go off of, it sounds like the women just wanted Harold dead for his money. But it also sounds like they didn't get very much and that Marsha didn't share what she was able to steal. Which makes me wonder, and of course this is just speculation, but I'm sure a lot of you are wondering the same thing. Does that mean that Ashley's motivation for the burglary was to get some of that money from her mom? And it doesn't end there, because recently, in August of this year, very recently, additional charges were added. According to court documents, the Jackson County Sheriff's Department uncovered emails which outlined further attempts to kill Harold. And in late July of this year, those emails were linked to Ashley. So by August, her charges were changed to the following. She now faces 2 counts of murder, 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder, 1 count of consumer product tampering, and 2 counts of attempted murder.
Prosecutors in southern Indiana have added attempted murder charges and are asking for a life sentence for a woman accused of working with her mother to kill her stepfather. Harold Allen died in December of 2022. Months later, investigators discovered he died after drinking a root beer float tainted with antifreeze at his Jackson County home. His stepdaughter, Ashley Jones, was charged with murder. Her mother, Marsha Allen, died from an apparent suicide after she was questioned by police. Now, new court documents include text messages between Jones and her mother indicating they poisoned Harold Allen twice before, but he survived.
So as of today, when I'm recording this, and of course, things do get delayed and changed all the time, but Ashley's trial is scheduled for January of 2025, which is just a few months away. And I'm sure we're going to get a lot more information out of that. And I am very curious to see how Ashley is going to plead. Is she going to end up pleading guilty in exchange for maybe a lesser sentence? Or is she going to plead not guilty and really stick to the story that she wasn't the one to actually commit the poisonings? I also have to mention that Harold is not the only one that Ashley is accused of killing. Yes, you heard that right. Now, legally speaking, it's unknown if authorities are actually looking into this, but Ashley's ex-husband's uncle believes that there is more to his nephew's death, as in Ashley's husband's death. Before everything happened with Harold, Ashley was married to a man named Tyerson. And in 2019, he was found dead inside of his home. And this happened just days after he had received an inheritance from his great-grandfather. And according to Ashley, he had died due to alcohol poisoning, which of course could certainly have been the case. But his uncle says that she had gotten him cremated so quickly that they weren't able to do any testing to actually confirm a cause of death. And so he thinks it's possible that Ashley did something to him. And he also believes that Stephen White from the burglary, who is his son, by the way, knows the answer.
News of Ashley Jones's arrest came as a surprise to many in Jackson County. But here in Louisville, William Jones says it was no surprise.
I was right all along. You can fool me, but you can't fool the Almighty.
William is Stephen White's father, one of the men accused of burglarizing Marsha Allen's home.
This is Stephen, and this is me.
He says he's also the uncle of Ashley's late husband, Tyerson Jones.
This is all I have of my nephew.
William says Tyerson was found dead in his home in 2019, just days after he received an inheritance from his great-grandfather. He says family members were unaware of Tyerson's death until they got a call from Ashley.
She had his body cremated, quick, fast, and in a hurry. So before the family could even ask for an autopsy or to have anything done about it.
William says Ashley told them he died from alcohol poisoning, but he always felt there was more to the story.
Ashley or Marsha had set it up to where they poisoned him within the liquor. And I think that Stephen knows what happened because they were really, really inseparable people.
But he says his suspicions fell on deaf ears. Jackson County Sheriff's Department says they're aware of the claims, but can't say whether or not law enforcement is investigating Tyerson's death.
Of course, I don't have enough information here to make a strong opinion of my own, but if Ashley is guilty of killing Harold, I will say it makes me wonder if she had done it before. And I'm definitely curious to see what you guys think about all of this. Do you think it's possible she was involved in her husband's death? Were those text messages that she had sent Stephen enough to prove that she was the mastermind behind Harold's death? Or do you think she was just bragging in those text messages and actually did take more of a backseat role like she initially admitted to, which obviously she needs to be held accountable if that's the case as well. But at the end of the day, regardless of how big of a role Ashley played, an innocent man was killed in a brutal, brutal way. It's truly sad to think about what the end of Harold's life was like, for him to have been suffering, in and out of the hospital in tons of pain, having no idea why. And behind it were people that he loved, allegedly. Of course, I have to say that. But it's just very painful and sad, just really heartbreaking to think of, what the last couple months of his life must have been like. And his loved ones really say that they hope he had no idea. And chances are he probably didn't. And of course, I completely agree. I really hope he didn't know, because it would make what he was going through so much worse.
When the police officer said, I have something to tell you and it's going to be really hard about your brother, I think my husband's response was, what could be harder than hearing that he's gone?
But the news was harder to hear and shocked Samantha Allen and her family.
He provided for them. He provided this home, and for them to just not value it at all, it's evil to know that the person he thought he was going to love forever did this. I hope that he never knew. I hope that he didn't know what was happening.
And I just wanted to say to Harold's family, if they happen to see this, that I'm truly so sorry for your loss and for how it happened. For you to have gone through the initial grief and shock when he passed away tragically so young, in his 50s. And then 9 months later, have to start thinking about it in an entirely different way. And now you're going up against a trial and trying to navigate all of that. It's got to be so confusing, so painful, so infuriating, and I can't imagine being in your shoes. Now, this week in Harold's honor, I wanted to make a donation to something that I think he would have found meaningful. And so I did a little research and I found an organization called the International Bluegrass Music Association. As I said earlier, Harold loved bluegrass music, was very passionate about it, and got a lot of enjoyment and comfort out of it. And so I think he would have been all about the IBMA Foundation. IBMA was created with the mission of building a brighter future for bluegrass music, and they achieve that by supporting programs and projects that focus on bluegrass-related arts and culture, education, literary work, and historic preservation. Among the many things they do, I found it really interesting that they fund schools to hire bluegrass bands for school programs and really emphasize the importance of music education, which I also agree is very, very important. Harold had so much more life left to live, and obviously nothing is going to bring him back, but I'm so glad that at the end of the day, this was uncovered, that the truth came out, and that justice seems to be on the horizon. But that is all I have for you guys today. I will, of course, be back next week to discuss another case, and until then, stay safe out there.